She begged him to stay. He went camping instead. When she called me whispering, "Please don't let my baby die," I rushed her to the hospital. Alone, bleeding, barely breathing. My brother missed the birth, missed the death, and my husband thinks he deserved the break. So I took my daughter, and I left. But now, I'm the one everyone says went too far. ATA? For threatening to divorce my husband, because he keeps defending the man who let his pregnant wife suffer alone. My brother? That's the question I never thought I'd be writing, and yet here I am. Sometimes I wonder if the man I married is still the same person standing across the room from me, or if I've changed so much I can't recognize what love is supposed to look like anymore. Has he truly changed, or am I the one who's breaking apart, piece by piece, unable to forgive something he swears isn't his? Maybe it's both, and maybe that's the part that keeps me up at night. I don't really know where to begin, or if there even is a right place to start when you're trying to untangle the mess of guilt, grief, and fury that's been sitting on your chest for months like a cinder block. But I guess I'll start with the beginning of us, me and Mark. My older brother Jake introduced me to Mark. They were best friends, had been since high school. Jake always said Mark was the one person he'd trust with his life, and with his little sister, Mark was kind, grounded, the kind of guy who helped elderly neighbors shovel snow in the winter without being asked. He wasn't flashy or loud, but there was a steadiness to him that made me feel like I could lean on him without falling. Jake's approval meant everything to me, and knowing how protective he'd always been, I figured if Mark had passed that test, then he must have been the real deal. And he was, still is, in so many ways. We fell in love slowly, like easing into warm water. It wasn't fireworks, but it was something better, safe, deep, lasting. We had shared dreams, plans that didn't need grand declarations, only quiet consistency. We got married young. Our life together wasn't extravagant, but it was full of the kind of love that builds from the quiet corners of everyday life. Before Lily was born, it was just the two of us building a rhythm, slow mornings with coffee and silence, late-night frozen pizza after long days, small joys like thrift store dates, and old movies we never finished. We learned each other in those years, his quiet patience, my chaotic energy, how we balanced each other like two parts of the same breath. But everything became more vivid when Lily arrived. Suddenly, our little routines weren't just ours. They were memories we were building for her. Morning coffees became chaotic breakfasts, with spilled cereal and giggles. Saturdays weren't just for pancakes anymore. They were for dinosaur-shaped ones, made under Lily's strict supervision. Grocery shopping turned into scavenger hunts for her favorite snacks. Every ordinary thing became magic through her eye. Our evenings shifted too. After Lily went to bed, we'd curl up on the couch, sometimes exhausted, sometimes laughing, sometimes just sitting in silence with our mismatched socks touching under the blanket. The TV might be playing some show neither of us truly cared about, but we were together, and that togetherness used to be everything. There was warmth in the routine, comfort in the predictability, even the quiet had its own kind of music. And then, when Lily came along, our miracle, our son, we felt complete. She was the best parts of both of us wrapped into a bundle of wonder. Her laughter made the air lighter, her curiosity about the world rekindled things in me. I thought I'd outgrown belief in magic, in good dreams and lucky stars. Watching Mark become a father made me fall in love with him all over again. He was patient, gentle, always the one to get up when she had nightmares, always knowing how to make her giggle when she pouted. We weren't perfect, no couple is, but there was a time when I truly believed we were unbreakable. And then Jake met Grace. They met a few years after I was married. Their love story started later, but when it began, it moved like it had always been waiting for them. Grace was luminous. There's no better word. She had this way of seeing the world that made you want to be softer with it. And Jake, who had always been a little reckless, a little impatient, became someone gentler by her side. He laughed easier. He called just to say hi. Grace anchored him in ways none of us expected, but all of us welcomed. Jake and Grace had always admired the kind of life Mark and I had built. They said it often, usually after dinner when Lily would do a little dance routine in her pajamas, or when she'd snuggle up in Grace's lap mid-story. I remember Grace once saying, almost wistfully, "You two make it look easy. Like family is just joy, even in the chaos." Jake agreed. He used to joke that he wanted a daughter exactly like Lily, curious, bright, with the stubbornness of a lawyer in the heart of a fairy. They got married 4 years ago, and for a while they lived with us while they saved for a house. It was chaotic and crowded, but in the best possible way. Grace and I would cook together, while Jake and Mark yelled at sports on TV. Lily would drag Grace into imaginary adventures that lasted hours. It was loud, joyful, full of tiny rituals and inside jokes. It felt like family was supposed to feel. There was something deeply comforting about that chapter. Four adults, sharing responsibilities, laughter, and late-night talks about dreams and fears. We'd take turns doing daycare pickups, groceries, even laundry. It wasn't always perfect, but it was simple in the best way. It felt like family not just in name but in motion. Everything from folding towels to taking turns rocking Lily to sleep when she had nightmares. On Sunday mornings, we'd eat cinnamon rolls fresh from the oven, still in pajamas, while Lily climbed into Grace's lap with sticky fingers and a grin big enough to make your heart ache. She called them her bonus parents, a phrase she'd picked up from a storybook, and in her world, it just meant more people who loved her. But with Grace, it was different. Lily didn't just love Grace the way kids naturally love adults who are kind to them. She idolized her. Grace had this gentle, magical energy that made everything feel safe and fun at the same time. She'd braid Lily's hair while telling made-up stories about forest fairies who lived in teacups. She built pillow forts that became castles and let Lily paint her nails in rainbow colors without ever once asking her to sit still. Grace talked to Lily like she was a real person, not just a kid. Listened when she had big feelings, took her imaginary friends seriously, remembered the names of all her stuffed animals. There were nights when Lily would climb out of bed and wander into their room, and instead of sending her back, Grace would tuck her in next to her and hum lullabies until she drifted off. There was something in the way Grace saw Lily as whole, as important, as real that made Lily gravitate toward her like the moon to the tides. And because of that, even now, I still sometimes catch Lily looking out the window with this faraway expression like she's hoping Grace might walk back through the front door and scoop her up into one more story. Grace and Jake's journey to parenthood wasn't easy. It was a long, grueling, and at times quietly devastating road. While Mark and I had Lily almost effortlessly, they faced struggle after struggle. Grace had always dreamed of being a mother, and Jake wanted a family more than he ever admitted aloud. But months turned into years of trying, first with hope, then with mounting anxiety, and eventually with a quiet kind of sorrow that became the backdrop of their lives. There were miscarriages, some so early they barely had time to hope, and others that left them shattered. There were hormone treatments that wreaked havoc on Grace's body and spirit, countless appointments, invasive tests, whispered conversations that ended in tears. At one point, Grace told me she had started avoiding baby showers. She couldn't bear the pastel balloons, the glowing mothers-to-be, the unspoken envy that tightened her chest. They even looked into adoption, but the process became another emotional labyrinth. Long waitlists, disqualifications over paperwork, and a heartbreakingly close call that fell through at the last minute. Through it all, they stayed strong on the outside, but I saw the cracks when no one else was looking. Jake, usually so upbeat, started drinking more quietly. Grace smiled less and stopped planning birthdays. And yet, they never gave up. Grace would still light a candle every month on the night she first found out she was pregnant, hoping it would bring them better luck the next time. Jake built a rocking chair even when they didn't know if they'd ever need it. It wasn't just the desire for a child, it was the aching hope of being able to give and receive that kind of love. That unconditional, life-changing kind of love they saw in Lily every time she reached up for a hug or asked for one more bedtime story. They both adored Lily. Watching her grow, her curiosity, her boundless energy, the silly songs she sang while dancing on the coffee table, only deepened their longing. Grace once confessed to me that every time Lily called her fairy Auntie Grace, she wished with all her heart that one day someone would call her Mommy. So when Grace finally got pregnant again, and made it past all the terrifying milestones, it felt like we were all collectively holding our breath in hope. And when Grace finally got pregnant again, and made it past all the terrifying milestones, it felt like we were all collectively holding our breath in hope. They didn't just want a baby, they wanted this. The Saturday morning pancake messes, the bedtime songs, the tiny hands tugging on their sleeves. Grace would watch Lily with this quiet wonder, like she was taking mental notes on how to be a mother. And Jake, for all his bravado, would soften completely when Lily crawled into his lap and called him Uncle Jay. To prepare for the birth of the tiny Angle, they finally moved out to a little house just beyond the city limits. A quiet place nestled in a sleepy suburb with old oak trees and wind chimes on the porch. The kind of place where the sidewalks were always lined with dappled shade and neighbors waved from their porches. Grace said she wanted calm, peace, space for the baby to grow up surrounded by nature, and Jake agreed. The air felt cleaner there, the pace slower. She said she could finally hear her own thoughts. We all understood. We supported the move, helped them pack, even helped paint the nursery. We knew it was the right step for them, for the baby. But after they left, something shifted in our home, in a way that I wasn't prepared for. The house, once full of overlapping conversations and spontaneous laughter, suddenly felt cavernous. The quiet was unfamiliar, and it made the walls echo. The spot on the kitchen counter where Grace used to perch and sneak bites of whatever we were cooking seemed too clean. The couch cushions didn't hold the same dents from late-night movie marathons, and the hallway didn't carry the same scent of lavender and fresh laundry. Lily noticed it too. For weeks, she asked when Grace and Uncle Jake were coming back. She'd leave her drawings on the guest bed they used to sleep in. At night, she'd look out the window toward the driveway, hoping their car might pull up like it used to. One morning, she asked if Grace had gone to live in the sky with the fairies. It was just the three of us again, and even though that was how it all started, it didn't feel the same anymore. It was quieter, teddier, but somehow lonelier too. It was like someone had dimmed the light in our home, and we were all pretending not to notice. Still, life kept moving forward, and in the quieter spaces they left behind, something beautiful was unfolding in theirs. Jake was very different during this pregnancy. From the moment Grace showed him the positive test, something shifted in him, like he was finally breathing after years of holding it in. From the very beginning, he stepped into the role with a kind of seriousness and devotion that none of us had ever seen from him before. He didn't just show up, he was present. He went to every single appointment, even the routine ones, sitting in the corner, eyes trained on the ultrasound screen, nodding thoughtfully at every update like he was memorizing it for life. He built the crib himself, sanding every corner smooth, double-checking each screw. He painted the nursery with grace, choosing a soft buttery yellow, adding tiny decals of stars and clouds across one wall. He ordered a glider after reading online that Grace would need it during late-night feedings. He even started keeping a notebook. Jake, who never journaled a day in his life, full of baby name ideas, parenting tips, and things he wanted to teach their child. Grace, too, bloomed in her own quiet, glowing way. She started knitting again, something she hadn't done since college, and made tiny booties in neutral colors. She kept a detailed pregnancy journal, decorated with stickers and sketches. Every morning she drank a smoothie loaded with every vitamin her OB recommended. Even though she hated kale, she played lullabies through headphones she wrapped around her belly. She meditated, she rested, she read all the books, joined support groups, went on walks. She was so careful, so deliberate, as if she was trying to protect every second of this miracle. Their home became a nest. Grace kept fresh flowers on the dining table. Jake installed dimmer switches throughout the nursery. Their evenings were slow and sacred, hand-in-hand walks, cups of warm tea, baby name debates under soft lamplight. They had an aura about them that made you want to lower your voice when you visited, like you were stepping into a sacred space. And the rest of us were just as invested. My parents were ecstatic, constantly dropping off little gifts, books, soft toys, a rocking horse hand-carved by my dad. Grace's mom crocheted a baby blanket with stars and moons, and her sister brought over maternity clothes every other weekend. Mark and I were ready to be on call for babysitting. Lily, in all her wonder, drew dozens of pictures for the baby and carefully taped them to the fridge at Grace's house, declaring herself the big cousin captain. There were 2 baby showers, one hosted by Grace's coworkers, and one at our house, where we strung fairy lights across the backyard and made cupcakes shaped like rubber ducks. There were name lists passed around the table, every vote tallied like it mattered. The nursery closet was full. The freezer was stocked with casseroles. The bags were packed. It felt like, finally, the universe was making up for all the pain they had been through. Like we were all waiting at the edge of something extraordinary, just days away from a new chapter. We were so close to the finish line. And then, in the final week of Grace's pregnancy, her body began to feel unfamiliar. She told me she was constantly tired, even after a full night's sleep. Her ankles were swollen, her back ached, and she had a kind of persistent tightness in her chest that made her feel like she couldn't breathe deeply. But more than anything, she felt off, like something wasn't right, even if she couldn't put it into words. There were nights when she couldn't sleep, nights she'd lie in bed, rubbing her belly and whispering to the baby, as if asking for reassurance. She told Jake she needed him, not just for the obvious reasons, but because she was scared. Scared something might go wrong, scared of being alone, scared of what her body might be trying to tell her. But that weekend, Jake had a wilderness retreat planned with his old college friends, guys he hadn't seen in years, people who had flown in from all over the country for what they called a once-in-a-decade reunion. They were heading to a remote mountain cabin with no cell service, no internet, just nature and nostalgia. Grace asked him, at first gently and then more urgently, to stay. She didn't beg, but the fear in her eyes made it clear. Jake hesitated. I truly believe he did, but in the end, he said she was overthinking it, that she'd been fine for weeks, that her OB said everything looked perfect, that he'd only be gone one night. He told her it was important to him, this rare chance to reconnect with the friends who knew him before everything got so heavy. He promised he'd be back Sunday night. That Saturday morning, he hugged her at the door, kissed her on the forehead, and told her to try and relax. Grace stood in the doorway, one hand on her belly, the other still raised in an almost wave as he drove away. I don't know if she cried after the door closed. I never asked. Later that afternoon, Grace sat alone in the bedroom, surrounded by silence so thick it almost hummed. The baby had been quiet most of the morning, and though she'd tried to talk herself out of worry, the gnawing unease wouldn't leave her. Her body felt like it was sinking into itself. Her legs were swollen and tingling, her back strained with each movement, and her chest carried a strange tightness, like something inside her was bracing for impact. She shifted her weight, stood up slowly, and paced the room with one hand cradling her belly. She whispered softly, like a prayer, "Come on, little one, let mama know you're okay." Still nothing. Her eyes drifted toward the hallway shelf. The ultrasound photo, her favorite, rested there in its delicate white frame. Week 32. The baby's tiny body curled like a comma, its hands up near its face. She'd always said it looked like the baby was smiling, like it was already in on the joke of life. She needed to see that smile, needed it like oxygen. Grace stepped into the hallway and reached for it. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the frame, but her balance wavered. Her heart skipped, her vision blurred. The frame slipped, clattering against the wood floor, skidding near the top of the stairs. Without thinking, she stepped toward it. Her foot landed wrong. The world tilted. She grabbed at the railing, but it was too late. Her body pitched forward. The weight of the baby shifted, pulling her off balance. She fell hard, tumbling down the stairs, her limbs folding awkwardly beneath her, her head cracking against the edge of a step. The world went black. I didn't know any of this until later. All I knew was that my phone rang, and Grace's voice came through the line like a ghost. It was barely more than a whisper, hoarse, trembling, and soaked in fear. "Rachel," she said. "I don't feel right. I think something happened. I can't get up." Everything inside me turned cold. I don't remember exactly what I said. I just remember grabbing my keys, nearly tripping over my shoes at the door, yelling for Mark to watch Lily, and speeding through every red light on the way to their house. The drive was a blur of panic and prayers, the kind you don't even know how to form. I must have called her name 100 times in my head. When I arrived, the front door was slightly ajar, just wide enough to send a chill down my spine. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that screams something is wrong. I stepped inside, calling out for her, and then I saw her. She was crumpled at the bottom of the staircase, barely conscious, her face pale and slick with sweat. One hand was wrapped protectively around her belly. The other was weakly clutching the ultrasound frame, now shattered, its glass splintered across the floor like a metaphor too cruel to bear. Blood was pooled beneath her, soaking into the carpet in heavy dark patches that made my breath catch. For a split second, I froze. Everything in me screamed to panic, but I couldn't. I knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her face, my hands shaking as I tried to assess whether she was even still with me. "Grace," I whispered, "I'm here. I've got you. You're okay." Her eyes fluttered open just enough to find mine. Her voice was slurred and low, and I had to lean in close to hear her. "Please don't let my baby die," she whispered. "Please, Rachel." I don't remember carrying her to the car. I don't remember driving to the hospital. I only remember her grip on my hand in the passenger seat, tight, desperate, like she was holding on to life with the last strength she had left. The hospital was chaos and silence all at once. I remember shouting for help as I burst through the emergency doors, Grace in my arms, limp and bleeding. Nurses swarmed us immediately, their voices overlapping in sharp, clinical tones. I kept repeating, "She's 39 weeks. She fell. Please." She fell. They rushed her into trauma triage, while I stood there frozen just beyond the edge of the action. My hands were soaked in blood. I was still wearing socks. I hadn't even noticed I'd left the house without shoes. Then someone asked the question that almost broke me. "Is her husband here to sign the consent for emergency surgery?" I blinked. "He's not here. He's out of town. There's no service where he is." They hesitated. Protocols. Legal forms. Someone needed to authorize the operation. I said, "She's dying. The baby is dying. What does a signature matter if there's no one left to hold the pen?" After a tense exchange between the on-call administrator and the attending, they finally moved forward. Grace was wheeled away. I wasn't allowed to follow. I sat in that freezing waiting room, trembling, blood drying on my hands. Mark arrived about an hour later. He'd been out with Lily when I'd called him. Screaming, he tried to wrap his arms around me, but I couldn't breathe in his hug. I didn't want comfort. I wanted a time machine. Eventually, a doctor walked out. His face was tired, mouth set in that neutral mask of practiced sorrow. "We did everything we could," he said. "They saved Grace. But not the baby." She'd gone into hemorrhagic shock. The internal bleeding was too severe. To save her life, they had to perform a hysterectomy. She would live, but she would never carry a child again. She had lost everything in one fall. Her child, the future she had just begun to believe in, the version of herself she had fought to become. When she woke up, she cried out before her eyes were even fully open. "Jake? Where's Jake? Where's my baby?" I rushed to her side, but she didn't see me. Her hands clutched the air above her stomach like she was trying to hold on to something that had already slipped away. The nurse sedated her. I stayed by her side, holding her limp hand, whispering things she wouldn't remember. Later, when Grace came to again, the doctor told her everything. She didn't scream. She didn't even cry. She just went still. There was something worse than grief in that stillness. It was hollow, like something inside her had simply shut off, a power outage in the sun. When our parents came, we tried to tell her it wasn't her fault. We brought flowers, whispered reassurances, promised she wasn't alone. Grace just looked past us all and quietly asked, "Can you dim the lights, please? It's too bright." She didn't speak for 2 days, barely ate, barely blinked, just lay there with one hand on the place where her baby used to live. Jake came back Sunday night. He walked into the hospital, still in his hiking boots, sunburned and stiff, his eyes bloodshot. When he saw her pale and bandaged, he fell to his knees beside the bed. "Grace?" he sobbed. "God? I didn't know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He kissed her fingers and whispered apologies like prayers over and over. Grace turned her head slowly and looked at him. Then she looked away and said in a voice that didn't tremble, "I want a divorce." Jake went silent. I don't think he even understood what she'd said at first. He blinked. "No, no, baby, please. Don't say that. I didn't know. I wouldn't have gone if I'd known. Please, please." She didn't scream. She didn't accuse. She didn't even flinch. She just repeated it, flat, final, like the sky going dark before a storm. "I want a divorce." After that, Jake unraveled. He moved back into their house. Alone. The nursery remained untouched. The crib he'd built by hand still sat under the soft glow of the nightlight he'd installed. The tiny stuffed giraffe Lily had picked out was still propped in the corner. Jake drank, quietly, constantly. He stopped answering calls. He slept in the nursery some nights, curled into the glider as if he could rock the silence away. No one said it outright at first, but one by one, the family began to turn away. My parents stopped calling. My mom cried in private and avoided saying his name out loud. My dad couldn't even look at him when they crossed paths at the hospital. Grace's parents refused to let Jake into the room again. Her father physically blocked him in the hallway, and her mother told the nurses to keep him out. I think that was the moment Jake realized he wasn't just losing his wife, he was losing everyone. I didn't just walk away from Jake. I confronted him. 2 days after Grace was discharged, I showed up at his house without warning. He looked awful, unshaven, eyes red, a beer in his hand at 11. I didn't wait. "You left her," I said. "She begged you to stay, and you chose to leave. You chose to turn your phone off and vanish. She was 9 months pregnant. She told you something felt wrong." He looked like he wanted to say something, but I kept going. "You didn't just lose a child. You lost the right to call yourself a husband or a brother. You let her bleed out alone while you were drinking in the woods." He collapsed onto the stairs and covered his face with both hands. I didn't stay to comfort him. I walked out and didn't look back. But Mark did. He waited until Lily was asleep that night to say anything. He came into the room with this look on his face. Tired, defensive. "You need to apologize to Jake," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "He needs you. He's a mess, Rex. He's punishing himself." "Good. He should be punished. He lost his child. So did Grace, and she nearly lost her life too. He didn't do it on purpose." "No," I said, voice rising, but she told him she wasn't feeling right. She asked him to stay. He thought she was okay. She'd been fine for weeks. "You're acting like he killed the baby with his own hands." My voice cracked. "He might as well have." Mark's jaw tightened. "You're being cruel." "She was not a burden, Mark. She was terrified. She needed him, and he left. And now you want me to just what? Pretend it's okay?" He needed a break. The words hit me like a slap. "She should have called 911. Not you," he added. I froze. "What did you just say?" He sighed. "I'm just saying if it was really that bad, she should have called for help. Sooner." My whole body went cold. She was at the bottom of the stairs, barely breathing, cradling her belly like she could still protect that baby. "And you think it's her fault?" "That's not what I meant." "No?" My voice was shaking, because it sounds like that's exactly what you meant. That Jake did nothing wrong. That Grace didn't do enough while dying alone. "You're twisting my words." "No," I said. "You're showing me exactly who you are." He looked at me, and I waited for anything. A hint of understanding, remorse, even just silence that admitted guilt. But he said nothing. So I went upstairs, packed a bag for me and Lily, and walked out the door. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just left quietly, like someone slipping out of a dream that had long since turned into a nightmare. Lily didn't ask questions when I buckled her into the car seat. She just looked at me with those big wide eyes and said, Are we going to the fairy house? That's what she calls my parents' place. The house with the ivy-covered porch and twinkly lights and old hardwood floors that creak like they're singing. I nodded and said yes. She smiled. Maybe Grace will be there. I couldn't answer. I couldn't lie. I just started the car. We've been here 3 days now. 3 days of pretending I'm okay in front of Lily. 3 days of letting my parents hover around me, too afraid to ask what really happened. 3 days of silence from Mark. And still, I keep wondering, am I wrong? Is this grief talking or clarity? Is this what it feels like when a marriage cracks? Not suddenly but quietly, like a wall that's been crumbling for years and you only now notice the dust? I think about the man I married, the man who used to rub my back when I was pregnant with Lily, who stayed up all night when I had early contractions just to make sure I was still breathing. The man who once cried when she said Dada for the first. Was that man still there when he said Grace should have just called someone else? Or had he already disappeared, inch by inch, behind his loyalty to my brother? I know Mark isn't a bad man. I know Jake didn't mean for this to happen. I know none of us ever thought we'd be here, fractured and broken, staring at each other across a battlefield made of silence and blame. But I also know this. When Grace begged not to be left alone, Jake left anyway. When I asked Mark to stand with me, just to say it wasn't okay, he stood with Jake instead. And now I don't know if that's something I can ever come back from. I don't know how to forgive a man who heard me say she begged him to stay and still said he deserved to go. So now I'm here sitting in the dim light of my childhood bedroom, watching Lily sleep beside me with her little arms wrapped around a worn-out plush rabbit Grace once gave her, wondering if I've already made the choice I keep trying to avoid. Maybe I'm not looking for justification. Maybe I'm just hoping someone, somewhere, will tell me I'm not losing my mind for refusing to pretend this was just a sad accident we should all move on from. So I'm asking you now, ATA for threatening to divorce my husband, because he keeps defending the man who let his pregnant wife suffer alone.